Welcome to the Weather Farm. I'm Meteorologist Christopher Hale. Will this heat wave that is plaguing the eastern half of the United States, does it show any signs of breaking in the days ahead? And what does our 4th of July forecast look like for the continental United States? We have all the details and more, so let's jump right into our forecast. As we begin our Monday, we are watching an area of storms move out of Kansas into Missouri. Some of these are producing heavy downpours as well, though the threat of severe weather is very minimal. We're also watching scattered showers across the south, across parts of Louisiana, into Mississippi, even into the panhandle of Florida. Down along the Mexican coast, we are watching what was once Tropical Storm Barry make its way onshore, but as it interacts with those higher mountain elevations along the Mexican coast, we do expect Barry to dissipate into a post-tropical system as we go through our Monday. Out west, we are dominated by high pressure centered across parts of Montana. We have an area of low pressure across Arizona that is keeping the western half of the United States relatively dry. The same is going to be for our Tuesday. We do see a little more showers making their way into eastern New Mexico. That high dives out of Montana down across the central plains. That's going to keep dry conditions and the heat going for our Tuesday. Along southern parts of Texas, we do have a chance of scattered showers. Out across the east, we have that cold front that's snaking its way from New York down through Arkansas early on our Tuesday morning, and out ahead of it is bringing scattered showers. A little bit more notable storms across parts of Quebec as we begin our Tuesday morning. So let's put everything into motion and let's look at our forecast day by day, starting with our Monday. So as we begin our Monday, we're seeing these systems. We're going to move to the east. As we get to the daytime heating, that's when we're going to get those scattered storms going. We could see an isolated storm or two turn severe, though we're not really expecting that. That cold front continues to move off towards the east during the day Tuesday, bringing scattered showers and an isolated thunderstorm to the east coast as it makes its way through Virginia. Out west, we are seeing scattered storms start to pop as we begin our Wednesday. We're looking across the Dakotas for the next chance of some precipitation as we make our way Wednesday into Thursday. This is the area that we're going to focus on for severe weather as we make our way to the 3rd and into the 4th. We do have scattered showers across the Four Corners region making their way into West Texas as we end the week. Even up into British Columbia, we have rain, and in those highest elevations, it is cold enough for snow across that part of the country. And what's causing all this is our jet stream. We have a ridge across the western half. Here's that trough of that cold front making its way across the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley Monday night, Tuesday, and into our Wednesday. Out west, we have a ridge building that's going to bring southerly winds up across the Central Plains, and we see a low pressure system, a trough digging across parts of Ontario and across parts of British Columbia. Out in the center, we have a ridge building that's going to build warmth eastward as we go from the 3rd through the 5th of July. Taking us back to our Monday morning forecast again, we're going to start the day with storms here across the central part of the United States. When we look at the Storm Prediction Center, its outlook for day 1, we're not really expecting much in the way of severe weather. We do have a marginal risk stretching from Pennsylvania through the Ohio Valley, back down through Oklahoma into northern Texas. Out west, we do have a slight marginal risk for southern Oregon and northern California. Elsewhere, the main threat is going to be scattered afternoon thunderstorms, basically from coast down to Florida, over to Texas, all the way up to the Canadian border. The chance of pop-up thunderstorms is going to be there for most of the country, and that's really what we're going to expect over the next several days. In fact, as we take a look into our Tuesday, we see that risk really extending from coast to coast, with the greatest chance of severe weather stretching from New Hampshire down towards North Carolina. But even at that, it is going to be very minimal in terms of hail, tornado. Isolated strong winds, heavy downpours are going to be the main threat as we make our way into our Tuesday. If we take a look at our radar here across the Midwest, we're watching on our Monday, we're watching those storms kind of fizzle out as we get into those morning hours. But in the afternoon, we start to see those individual cells starting to pop all across the Ohio Valley. Any one of these can pop anywhere, and they can produce locally heavy amounts of rain. Not expecting tornadoes or hail. The main threat is gusty winds and heavy rainfall across this area. In fact, when we get to our Wednesday morning, we are looking at rainfall if you get under the right thunderstorm. And I think this map really does a great job of telling the story because it shows how random the heavy rainfall is going to be. It's going to be dependent upon, does the cell develop over your area and does it dump a lot of rainfall? So we could have under any isolated cell 1 to 2 inches of rain. Most areas, however, will stay under 1/4 of an inch as this cold front makes its way from the northern plains through the Ohio Valley and off the east coast. I did mention that we are watching Tropical Storm Barry. It is centered right now as a tropical a storm with winds about 40 miles per hour. It formed on our Sunday in the Bay of Campeche and is moving generally to the northwest at about 8 knots per hour. The cone of uncertainty places Barry coming ashore sometime early on Monday morning. So by the time we watch this video, Barry has already made its way on shore. And in fact, by the time we get to Monday afternoon, Barry has been downgraded to a tropical depression. It will continue in that northwesterly path, and we do expect it to become post-tropical by the end of day on our Monday. The main threat with this system is going to be heavy rains and localized flooding across the Mexican countryside. As we look elsewhere across the tropics, we have Barry here in the Bay of Campeche. We are watching an area in the Gulf on either side of Florida. There is a less than 40% chance of development in this area over the next 7 days, but the National Hurricane Center has highlighted that area as an area to watch as we move towards the 4th of July weekend. In terms of our temperatures for our Monday, we're going to have exceptional warmth here across the desert Southwest, 110, 115 likely. Those warm temperatures extend all the way up into Idaho, where we could be touching the century mark in southern Idaho, even into eastern Washington. Out across the northern plains, where we have those storms that are making their way out into the Ohio Valley, temperatures here are going to be held down into the 70s and 80s, but it's 90s and high 90s at that for places like Dallas and Austin. San Antonio, you're going to be in the low 90s for your Monday, but that warmth continues off to the East Coast, where we are seeing temperatures from Atlanta up to DC in the low 90s or upper 80s. Now, northern New England, you are cooling down just a little bit. Temperatures here are in the 70s and 80s. It's almost a repeat pattern as we make our way to our Tuesday. Here along the desert Southwest, extremely warm. We're starting to see the return of 90s for parts of eastern Montana into eastern Wyoming. That central plains warming up as that ridge that's been over the west coast starts to move a little bit towards the east for our Tuesday, where we have those rain showers moving through the Ohio Valley with the passage of that cold front. Temperatures here will be held down in the 70s and 80s. It is warm across the Gulf, 90s. Dallas, you could be approaching 101. Even down into Florida, you are in the 80s and 90s for your Tuesday. And out in the Northeast, we are cooler with temperatures in the 70s for your Tuesday highs. As we make our way into our Wednesday, the warmth continues across the Central Plains. 80s and 90s are very common. 100s down in Texas. Look out in the desert Southwest. Still no sign of that heat breaking for the deserts anytime soon. Even the interior of California, you're pushing triple digits. But across parts of Washington and Oregon, we are cooling down into the 80s and 90s for our Wednesday, and far up into British Columbia, we're cooling down into the 60s and 50s. We remember from our map into motion, by the end of the week, we're going to watch a trough dig across that part of the country, and we're going to see extremely below normal temperatures across parts of British Columbia. But out east, it is warm. The Gulf, 80s and 90s, which is seasonal. Looking into the Northeast, you're warming back up with the passage of that cold front. We look towards our Thursday, the day of an important travel day across the country. It is warm from the northern plains down through the south into the mid-Atlantic, into the Northeast. New York City, you're back to near 90 for your Thursday. Out in the desert Southwest, not as warm, 100 to 110, but we will take that little relief anytime we can get that. And the interior is cooling down in California with temperatures near 100. Oregon and Washington, you're cooling down into the 70s and 80s. And as I mentioned, let's look up here towards British Columbia. We have some stations in those higher elevations that are going to be pushing the low 40s by the time we get to Thursday after. So definite cooler temperatures making their way into the Canadian provinces. And the all-important 4th of July forecast has warm temperatures and hot, sizzling firecracker temps from coast to coast. 100s in the desert, 90s stretching up through Iowa into Minnesota, Wisconsin, down through Illinois and Indiana, down across the south. Atlanta, you could be pushing the low to mid 90s. We even have 96 out in the Carolinas. The only real cool spot is going to be the Northeast, where even northern Maine, you're going to be held in the 60s, but most areas in the Northeast are going to be 70s and 80s for your 4th of July forecast. One thing I do want to mention, we've been talking about the extreme heat. We've been talking about the precipitation. This is the drought monitor that was issued for the United States last Thursday. And it has most areas in a moderate drought, that orangish color. We start to get into that moderate drought. So the western third of the United States, including all of Idaho, including all of Nevada, Utah, we're in either a moderate or a severe drought. We start to get to exceptional drought as we make our way into West Texas. Even down south and west San Antonio, you're in an exceptional drought. And far southwestern New Mexico, you are in an exceptional drought. Now the problem is we're not going to see the type of precipitation that we need to alleviate these drought conditions anytime soon. This time of year in the Ohio Valley, in the Central Plains, we're evaporating almost 2/10 of an inch of liquid precipitation from the ground per day. So we need on average 1 to 1.5 inches of rain to replenish the soil and prevent drought conditions from getting worse. And when we look at the national map, as we look at the total precipitation, making our way towards Monday into the upcoming holiday weekend through Saturday morning, where you see these purples and reds, they're isolated here across the Intermountain West, down through Oklahoma into Arkansas, up towards Missouri, across the northern tier. If you get under the right thunderstorms, that's where you could see 1 to 2, possibly 3 inches of rain. The best chance of that is going to be in the southeast. Georgia, you have a good chance at widespread 1 to 2 inches. Along the Gulf Coast, into the Panhandle of Florida and down towards Tampa, another good chance of 1 to 2 inches. But most areas for this upcoming week are going to see less than a half inch of precipitation, as indicated by these green to the blues. We're going to watch across the Canadian prairies, where we're going to see heavy amounts of rain for British Columbia, making their way into central Saskatchewan, as well as out towards Quebec. You could see significant rain this coming week. So I don't believe that when we look at the western third of the United States, I don't believe we're going to help any of that drought condition anytime soon, as we're expecting very little in the way of precipitation over the next 7 days. As we take our first look at July for our temperature outlook, we are watching out west, where we expect above normal temperatures to happen for the month of July. We expect a ridge to set up across the western half of the United States. That's going to lead to those above normal temperatures for the month of July. Through the Ohio Valley and Tennessee valleys down into the south, we have an equal chance of seeing a normal summer. The exception being in the Northeast. Again, you're likely to see above temperatures. We've been talking about Alaska a lot lately with their heat advisories, and that's going to continue into July. The eastern half, where we've seen those heat advisories, and this does include the Fairbanks area down towards the Kenai Peninsula, down towards Juneau and Anchorage, you're expected to see above normal temperatures as we make our way into July. It is the far western coast of Alaska where we have a better chance of seeing below normal temperatures for our July. And as we look at our precipitation, the northwestern half of Alaska is going to have above normal precipitation. The rest of the state will see equal chance of normal precipitation. But as we were talking about that drought, we see across the northern tier and into the central plains, we see below normal precipitation forecasted for the month of July. We see a good chance of equal or normal precipitation across the Four Corners region. But friends, don't let that deceive you, because normal precipitation is usually less than 1/4 of an inch for the entire month for many places in the Four Corners region out into the desert. It is east of the Mississippi that we see the greatest chance of above normal precipitation as we make our way through the month of July. How it all plays out, we will watch, but there are signs that the pattern is going to favor a more active pattern for the eastern half of the United States, while the ridge of warm air does take hold over the west half. We'll bring you any changes or any updates to this forecast as we go throughout the month of July, so stay tuned here at the Weather Farm. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this forecast here at the Weather Farm. It is the last day of June. The year is half over, but the second half of the year will keep you informed, and it'll keep us on our toes with more active weather pattern storms. Hurricane season will ramp up, and as we make our way to the fall, when will we start talking about snow? Have a great day, and we'll see you again real soon.